Good evening. The world still waits tonight for some definitive official word about a possible end to the bombing of North Vietnam. Both Washington and Hanoi are maintaining silence, which of course is not discouraging speculation that a break is imminent. The White House declined all comment today, although President Johnson will hold a news conference this week, possibly on Wednesday. In Paris, the North Vietnamese delegation to the peace talks canceled a regularly scheduled briefing for newsmen. There was an agreed-to ceasefire lasting 36 hours and covering 288 square miles of North Vietnamese territory. The ceasefire, or stand-down, ended officially at 4 o'clock this afternoon Eastern Time. While it was in effect, the United States returned 14 North Vietnamese prisoners to the city of Vinh. The prisoners were captured more than 2 years ago. Their release today was described by American officials as an act of goodwill, which it is hoped will lead to the release of other prisoners. It is believed that Hanoi still holds more than 300 American airmen whose planes were shot down over North Vietnam. Ground action in the south continues at a very low level. The lull in the fighting now is in its fourth week. Unidentified officials of the government of South Vietnam are continuing to express their misgivings about a possible bombing halt, and President Thieu himself has made it clear that he has certain reservations about stopping the bombing. ABC's Bill Brannigan reports from Saigon on why the Vietnamese seem uneasy.
A while back, I was talking with a Vietnamese acquaintance of mine. He said, "For you Americans, the war in Vietnam is simply another national experience, no matter how bad it may seem at times. But for we Vietnamese," he said, "the war is a question of national survival." This difference helps to explain why South Vietnam is taking such a hard line regarding further de-escalation. President Nguyen Van Thieu sits here in his presidential palace and carefully surveys the mood of his own country and the mood of the United States. If it appears that Washington is calling all the shots in any peace settlement, President Nguyen Van Thieu is in deep trouble. The fragile stability that he has brought to Vietnamese politics would shatter overnight. Civilian and military morale would sag, and the well-organized Viet Cong political apparatus would spring into action. He knows that if any peace settlement bears the stamp made in Washington, the Viet Cong would be in a position here to take over politically. President Nguyen Van Thieu is a clever politician. He's also a realist. He looks at the United States and he knows the war is unpopular. He also knows that many Americans aren't too concerned about what they regard as minor items in any settlement agenda. Minor items they may seem to Americans, but critical items affecting the future here. President Nguyen Van Thieu also is dealing with a lame duck American president, whose assurances of support will end with his retirement in January. South Vietnam will still be here. North Vietnam will still be here. The Viet Cong will still be here after Lyndon Johnson steps down. And so, Saigon is holding out for concessions. President Thieu's goals are, first, to get Hanoi to admit its part in the war here. Second, to firmly link the Viet Cong with Hanoi in the eyes of world opinion. Saigon cannot sit at the same table with the Viet Cong. If he can accomplish these goals, then President Nguyen Van Thieu is ready to go to Paris and sit alongside the United States and across the table from North Vietnam. For many Americans, the war in Vietnam is something of a nightmare. They'd like it to go away. But for the Vietnamese, the nightmare can't go away. There's no place for it to go. The problem is here, and here is where the Vietnamese live. And so it's understandable why Saigon is taking a hard line. The name of the game, as my friend said, is national survival. This is Bill Brannigan, ABC News, at the Presidential Palace in Saigon.
Next, General Curtis LeMay reports on his visit to Vietnam.
This is a molecular model of poly-1,4-cyclohexylene dimethylene terephthalate. How about that? And I'm Joanna Barnes here to tell you what this unique molecule of Codel polyester fiber means in carpets. It's so special, it's patented.
Every room in your house comes alive because carpets of Codel bounce back
beautifully. Even a house full of kids can't keep Codell fiber down. That's why Codell is the fastest growing carpet fiber. If you can't remember the name Codell, ask for poly 1,4-cyclohexylene dimethylene terephthalate.
We also make 2,2,4-trimethyl-1,3-pentane diol monoisobutyrate.
But that doesn't go in carpets.
Codell fiber has come back. Built-in.
Count on Codell, a member of the Eastman Kodak family.
General Curtis LeMay said today the current lull in the fighting is going on in Vietnam because the enemy, as he put it, has been cut to pieces and decimated and is withdrawing to his sanctuaries. LeMay conducted a fact-finding mission to Vietnam for George Wallace last week. The general also talked today about a possible halt to the bombing of the North. ABC's Charles Murphy reports from Washington.
General LeMay does not favor stopping the bombing of North Vietnam, but says he would support the president if a halt was ordered. He does not agree with those who view the current lull in hostilities in Vietnam as justification for stopping the bombing.
I gathered from conversations over there that another offensive is expected. And from the information about the supply situation in the North and the movement certainly indicates that there will be another one. If we stop the bombing completely, that means that offensive will be larger than it would otherwise, and it'll cost us more casualties. In other words, you're condemning some Americans to death by doing this that I don't think you should do.
LeMay was asked about a report he advocated a military attack on Cuba during the 1962 missile crisis. The report was contained in an article written by the late Senator Kennedy and quoted in news stories.
I read that this morning, and I'm never cease to be amazed at the things that come out from your opponents in a political campaign. This is 6 years ago, and my memory is not too sharp without going back and refreshing it. But I don't remember ever seeing the president during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
In retrospect, do you now approve the resolution of the Cuban Missile Crisis?
No, I don't believe I do. I think that we could have gotten the communists out of Cuba in addition to the missiles. And I think we should have done so because this has been a running sore ever since.
However, LeMay did not propose that military action be taken against Cuba now. Charles Murphy, ABC News, with the LeMay campaign in Washington.
George Wallace campaigned in Tennessee today. He said he is against a halt to the bombing of North Vietnam unless there are what Wallace called reciprocal concessions from Hanoi. In a moment, a preview of a new presidential poll and a look at the Nixon and Humphrey styles of campaigning.
This crystal is clear. Clear Floor Works is crystal clear on your floors. Clear goes on clear, dries clear, stays clear, and it never yellows. Lets all the natural beauty of your floors show through brilliantly. Clear, the crystal clear look from Johnson Wax.
Dirty rug? Try the new spray foam rug cleaner, Glory. You get instant deep cleaning foam. Sponge it in with a wet mop. It dries fast, usually 2 to 4 hours. Then vacuum. It's so easy you can clean your rug this afternoon, entertain guests tonight with Glory, new from Johnson Wax.
To some people, the political campaign has been underway for a long time, so we thought it might be a good idea to provide a fresh look at it. ABC's Lou Choppy, who has been covering Vice President Humphrey's campaign, and Ted Koppel, who has been reporting on the Nixon campaign, have exchanged assignments and switched candidates. Tonight, we have asked them to compare the styles of the candidates as they enter the home stretch. First, Lou Choppy reports his initial impressions of the Nixon campaign.
it's difficult and even dangerous to try to judge political style, because the only yardstick for this is whether it succeeds. Mr. Nixon's style has sometimes been called mechanical, and when you're accustomed to Hubert Humphrey's free-swinging, wide-ranging, off-the-cuff, off-the-top of the head kind of speech, why, Mr. Nixon indeed does sometimes seem mechanical.
If his speeches are supposed to run 20 minutes, they run 20 minutes. The language is almost always the same. Even his gestures seem studied and rehearsed. His hands and arms shoot out or up or down. Gestures that do not come from a man who is excited, rather from one who is trying to create excitement. But the real style is in what he says or fails to say, and the electorate he's trying to influence. You can't help but notice that the people who come to Nixon rallies are mainly white and middle class. And what they've come to hear is that the problems that face them and the nation, violence in the streets, the war in Vietnam, inflation, all of these can be solved by a change in government. Despite charges by Hubert Humphrey that Nixon does not take a stand, Mr. Nixon has issued detailed position papers on how these problems can be solved. But he does not go into details in his public appearances. He stays with generalities. He whips up enthusiasm with bands, cheerleaders, and pretty young girls. Everything, including a shower of balloons, comes off on schedule like a Broadway show that's been running for 3 years. The crowds are larger than those of Humphrey. They like what they hear and they show it. Nixon also likes what he hears, the applause and the cheers. And while he looks confident, overconfidence is another of the mistakes he apparently is going to avoid. Although the pace of his campaign is leisurely compared to that of Humphrey, he is stepping it up for the final 2 weeks of the campaign. More appearances and especially more television.
The overall impression you get is an unavoidable one. While Humphrey is a man fighting for a job, Richard Nixon acts and looks like a man who already has it. This is Lou Cioffi, ABC News, with the Nixon campaign.
To a reporter who's just spent the last 4 weeks with Richard Nixon, there are times when it almost seems as though Hubert Humphrey had carefully analyzed the presidential campaign of 1960, and then for some perverse reason had decided to pattern his bid for the presidency on Nixon's losing effort. Humphrey is running at a pace that would have decimated the Green Bay Packers in their prime. Nixon pushed himself the same way in 1960, but he's learned from his own mistakes. The sharpest contrast between the Humphrey and Nixon campaigns is to be found in terms of organization. Nixon's campaign has it, Humphrey's doesn't. Or if it does, every effort is being made to camouflage it. Schedules on the Humphrey campaign bear a certain resemblance to the Easter Bunny. No one over the age of consent has any business believing in either one. Clocks are a vital part of Nixon's campaign. They are a living reprimand to Humphrey's. And yet a certain recognizable form is emerging out of the chaos of the past few weeks. When a Republican seeks wide national support, he issues a bland, broad-based, nonpartisan appeal. That has been Richard Nixon's approach. A Democrat in trouble like Hubert Humphrey wraps himself in the party banner and seeks haven in the traditional Democratic strongholds. Among the workers, the elderly, and the minority groups, Hubert Humphrey is a man reborn, the prodigal son come home. In this environment, Humphrey himself is curiously touching, and the prospect of his victory becomes almost feasible.
The visible support for Hubert Humphrey, even here in the heart of New York City, is something less than overpowering. But apparently, Mr. Humphrey now believes that when those people and millions of other Democrats like them go to the polls, they will decide, after all, that Hubert Humphrey is their last best hope, if only by process of elimination. This is Ted Koppel, ABC News, with the Humphrey campaign in New York.
The Gallup poll to be published tomorrow will show that Richard Nixon still is well ahead in the national popular vote, but that Hubert Humphrey is now 3 percentage points closer to Nixon than in the poll released on October 10th. The new poll gives Nixon 43%, Humphrey 31%, Wallace 20%, with 6% undecided. The October 10th poll gave Nixon 44%, Humphrey 29%, Wallace 20%, unchanged, with 7% undecided. So there seems to be a wide divergence between the Gallup and the Harris polls. The most recent Lewis Harris poll, made from October 8th to October 10th, gave Nixon 40%, Humphrey 35%, Wallace 18%, with 7% undecided. So, although Gallup shows Nixon still way out in front, Harris says if Humphrey gains another 2 or 3 points, the election could become too close to call. The marriage of Mr. and Mrs. Aristotle Onassis evokes a comment from the Vatican. That report in a moment.
Bud and Sue let me have their cabin for the week. I was looking forward to some peace and quiet and a good hot cup of coffee. Well, I'll have to drink it black. Oh, Coffee Mate. Non-dairy coffee creamer. No need to refrigerate. 11 calories per level teaspoon. Tastes great. Just the way I like it. Coffee Mate. I'm going to remember that.
Ready for dinner, darling? Got fish and chicken. Frisky's Buffet fish and chicken. Buffet always brings you home. Must be more than good eating. I'll bet it's something special that satisfies more than just your appetite. Is that it? I wouldn't dream of serving you anything but Frisky's Buffet anyway.
Frisky's Buffet cat food. 12 delicious dishes. Better for people who think better of cats.
A Vatican spokesman said today that Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis knowingly violated Roman Catholic Church law when she married a divorced man and is now cut off from the sacraments of the Church. Monsignor Fausto Valanc, the chief of the Vatican press office, said it is not a matter of excommunication. It is what is termed in canon law an irregular situation. An irregular situation means that a Catholic can still attend church but cannot receive communion nor participate in other sacraments. A rainstorm that dampened the Onassis wedding party is considered good luck among the Greeks, but that same storm is said to be delaying the honeymoon. The couple are still aboard the $3 million yacht Christina, anchored off the wedding island of Scorpios, relaxing after an all-night party. This morning, the handful of guests scattered for home, the two Kennedy children, Caroline and John, headed back to New York and school. Like many new brides, Mrs. Onassis is not yet used to her new name. A reporter had to call Mrs. Onassis several times before the former Mrs. Kennedy realized he was speaking to her. The three Apollo 7 astronauts staged their last television show in space today and then fired the huge Apollo rocket engine to put them in position for tomorrow's splashdown. Details now from ABC science editor Jules Bergman.
Even as they made ready for tomorrow's splashdown, the Apollo 7 crew, still bothered by their colds, had their final orbital telecast. Wally Schirra got it started.
And we thought we'd give each of you a close-up of our beards this morning to prove that we have been here and that we are not fans of the Beard Club. I will not admit to the fact there's any gray in this beard. My hairdresser is the only one that knows. I'm now going to pan back for one last time across the cockpit here, and I guess this will end our weekly series with this broadcast. There's our navigator. Navigator here.
As the sun sinks slowly in the west.
Apollo 7 cutting out now.
After flying 4.5 million miles in 163 orbits, Apollo 7's crew start their re-entry at 6:42 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow morning. 30 minutes later, they're due to splash down in the Atlantic, 230 miles south of Bermuda, to be picked up by the aircraft carrier Essex. They'll wear their spacesuits in spite of worries about a possible fire hazard from broken wires in them, so their legs are protected against hitting the instrument panel. And they've now decided to wear their helmets to protect their heads from being bruised in the cockpit. But Schirra, Isley, and Cunningham, their sinuses draining, are worried about coughing spells as well as the danger of ruptured eardrums. All three are taking heavy doses of decongestants tonight to help. ABC's live coverage of the deorbit and splashdown begins at 6:15 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time tomorrow morning. This is Jules Bergman reporting.
In a moment, a report on the Olympic Games today.
People, they've discovered down under. They've discovered me, all because of Qantas. Day in, day out, day in, day out. I have got to get away from it all. Well, it's sink or swim. I'm sunk. Oh, I hate Qantas.
The 19th Olympic Games enter the second and final week today, with American athletes holding a commanding lead. ABC's Chris Schenkel reports on today's events from Mexico City.
Olympic weightlifting came to a climax with the heavyweight division when Joe Doobie won the only medal for the USA. Joe, here making his final lift, took the bronze, although he lifted the same total weight, 555 kilos, as Serge Redding of Belgium. Joe Doobie of Florida. Because Redding himself weighed 51 pounds less than Doobie, who tips the scales at an ample 332 pounds, the Belgian weightlifter took the silver medal. Now, watch him strain as he puts the weight above his head. And then his reaction like a basketball player. The strongest man in the world, Leonid Zabotinsky of Russia, however, had little trouble in defending his Tokyo gold medal. In his first and only attempt at the clean and jerk, Leonid lifted 446.5 pounds to make a total lift of 1,262 pounds. The master makes it look easy. In track and field, though, the United States ran away with the medals, most of them gold. The most spectacular feat of all was this leap by Bob Beamon. 29 feet, 2.5 inches, breaking the world record by almost 2 feet. Here, fabulous Dick Fosbury of Oregon State in the high jump. Watch him. Clearing the bar at 7 feet 4.25 inches and setting a new Olympic record and winning a gold for the USA. Overall, the men's track and field team won a total of 12 gold medals. The women 3 and our fantastic swimming team won 8 of the 10 gold medals awarded in the first 2 days of competition, as the United States has a wide lead in all categories of medal production. Chris Schenkel speaking from Mexico City.
Does it come with an ashtray?
Oh, here. Try this.
Thanks. I'd like to try another cigarette, too. Tastes hot.
I know what you mean. Picked these up today.
Long-size cools? Sounds promising.
Come up to the cool taste. Taste extra coolness in an extra length.
Say, honey, you got those cools?
Right here.
Like them?
Uh-huh.
Come up to the cool taste.
Try new Cool Filter Longs, the only extra-length cigarette with a taste of extra coolness. Cool Filter Longs, Cool Filter Kings. 2 sizes, 1 taste. A cool taste.
We have asked a number of our guest commentators to report to us this week their thoughts on the qualities of an ideal president. First up tonight, Stuart Alsop.
One thing is obvious about this election. Hardly anybody thinks any of the 3 candidates would make an ideal president. So it's an amusing game to try to construct an ideal president the way children construct an imaginary animal by giving a tiger, say, an elephant's head or a giraffe's feet. Here is my ideal president. He would have Robert McNamara's brains. Whatever his faults, it is just about certain that McNamara has more sheer brain power than any major public servant in our times. He'd look, I think, something like John Gardner, former Secretary of H.E.W. The president's appearance is important. He ought to look reassuringly presidential. The odd thing is that, in this television era, none of the three candidates really looks like a president. John Gardner does. I think he'd have Clark Clifford's ability to deal adroitly with people. Clifford is a genius as a people manager. Look at the way he vetoed escalation and turned our whole Vietnam policy around with hardly a squeak from the military. Then I think I'd borrow certain qualities from the candidates, too. For example, I'd borrow Dick Nixon's extraordinary political astuteness and long-headedness, which permitted him to preside over his own political resurrection. A president without first-class political abilities, even with McNamara's brains, might be a disaster. And I also think I'd borrow Hubert Humphrey's goodness of heart. Humphrey really does want to help his fellow men. Finally, I think I might borrow George Wallace's charisma, his ability to communicate with people and stir them up, a quality which Bobby Kennedy, a very different man, had too. A president has to be able to stir people up. He has to be, if you will, a bit of a demagogue if he is to accomplish great things. Well, that's my receipt for the ideal president. What's yours? Mrs. Stuart Alsop in Washington.
And we'll give you ours later on. Tomorrow night we'll have David Schoenbrun's thoughts on the same topic, the ideal president. That's tonight's news and comment. I'm Frank Reynolds. Good night.